Okay, guys, welcome to another episode of the Play to Win podcast. We're at the episode 101. I'm joined today with Max Bernier. He's the leader of the People's Party of Canada. And I wanted to bring him on today because we've got an upcoming election, whether it happens in the next few months or later on this year. I like the PPC's platform. I've enjoyed following Max and his stance on many of the Canadian issues that I think plague people today. I'm of the opinion that it's probably a better party to vote for than the Conservative Party, and I'll explain that in the broadcast as well. I've got some interesting questions for Max. Max, thanks for joining me today. How are you?
Thank you, Richard. I'm very happy to be with you. That's a nice day here in Montreal.
I'm just in the Toronto suburbs, so I'm also dealing with about minus 20 degrees Celsius weather, but such is life in Canada in the wintertime. But let's get right into it. So we've had an interesting number of years with Justin Trudeau leading Canada. I'm one of the people that have been critical of a lot of his policies and procedures. You were one of the few that actually stood up during the lockdowns, the forced vaccination protocols and all that sort of stuff. There was even a time that you were arrested, if I understand. You spent some time in jail because of your stance on these policies. Why did you stand up against the lockdowns, and why was that important to you?
Yeah, it was very important because, as you may know, when I decided to jump into politics in 2006, after 19 years in the private sector, I wanted to go in politics because I wanted to fight for a smaller government, more freedom, and less government. So when we created the People's Party in 2018, two of our four principles are, individual freedom and personal responsibility. So for me, when all that happened a couple of 3 years ago, it was 4 years ago, sorry, it was normal for me to question that. And I saw early that, what they were doing, it was using fear and propaganda to control the population. And they wanted to impose that jab on us. So that's why early in the beginning, I did rallies and I was out there speaking for individual freedom, for freedom of choice with an informed consent. And I didn't take the vaccine myself because we had data early in the beginning showing that that vaccine was not safe and effective. So, yeah, I did campaign. And like you said, these traditional establishment politicians were not taking any position for freedoms at that time.
I want to talk to you about taxation because one of the things I've noticed myself, I'm an entrepreneur. I've been working for myself since 2003. I've employed a lot of people. I've created a lot of tax revenue for the government. I've seen a lot of my friends during the Trudeau regime leave Canada. A lot of my friends that are entrepreneurs that have location independent businesses that found the taxation erroneous, burdensome, too much, if I can put it that way. And I think the straw that broke the camel's back for most of them was a lot of the lockdown protocols that happened. And anybody that had a location independent business that could pick up, move, and go and live somewhere else with more freedom and lower tax rates did so. I think I've seen a lot, and I'm even contemplating this myself, Max, if I'm being honest. I mean, I have family obligations that tie me to Canada still, but I think given the opportunity to go and live somewhere where the tax burden is significantly lower, is quite appealing. What do you say to the Canadians when it comes to your policies on taxation?
Yeah, we want them to keep more of their own money in their own pockets. So that being said, for businesses, for example, we will stop giving subsidies to all businesses, and instead we will have a flat tax on business of 10%. It's unfair that maybe the little shop in downtown Montreal won't be able to have subsidies coming from the federal government because they cannot have a lobbyist full time in Ottawa. It's unfair that there's programs at the federal level for black entrepreneurs only. So it's discrimination. It is racism. We will end all that and save a lot of money, $10 billion, and use that to have a flat tax for every business at 10%. So that makes sense for our country, but at the same time, need to be serious about our budget. We need to balance the budget because we have this inflation today because of these deficits, and we are paying the inflation tax right now. So the way to stop inflation for every Canadian, it's to balance the budget, and we can do that in 1 year. And after that, lowering tax for everybody. So that's part of our platform. And actually, what you're saying, what you just said, to just about people country, Calgary, Victoria, Vancouver, and I'm meeting a lot of business people, and they're telling me the same thing you have here in Canada. It's for them, they think that it's better to reinvest outside the country. So we need to bring back this investment, and we need to have a government that would be pro-business and not against business.
I don't see a meaningful offer to reduce taxes currently from Pierre Poilievre. He talks often about axing the tax, and I believe he's making reference to the carbon tax. And if I understand it correctly, the Liberals haven't implemented the carbon tax yet, as he's proposing to axe. So he's basically, if I understand this correctly, if you can clarify, he's proposing to axe a tax that doesn't exist today. Is that the extent of the tax relief the Conservatives are offering?
Yeah, actually, you're right by saying that, because for people who live in Quebec, they don't pay the carbon tax because Quebec has a cap and trade system. But for Canadians outside Quebec, yes, they're paying a carbon tax. So when Poilievre is speaking about axing the tax, is speaking about the carbon tax. But I must say that the Liberals, the new leadership of the Liberal Party of Canada, Carney or Freeland, they said the same thing. Carney said in a speech last week that he will ask the carbon tax, he will repeal that tax, he won't impose that tax. So now Poilievre has the same platform than the Liberals. But what they want to do, Poilievre and the Liberals, they want to fight climate change. They will impose more regulations business. We will withdraw from the Paris Accord. We want to give subsidies to the green industry. So we will withdraw from the Paris Accord. We want to impose any new taxes. We want to give subsidies to the green industry. So we know that the climate is always changing and will always change. But for us, that's not a priority. There's no climate emergency. So Poilievre and both candidates for the leadership of the Liberal Party of Canada share the same vision about the carbon tax. So Poilievre said he wants a carbon tax election. Actually, there's no it's now we won't have an election about that because all these mainstream political parties agree with that. We must have a referendum on immigration. The next election must be a referendum on immigration. That's more important for the future of our country.
Yeah, I'll get to immigration and wokeness and the climate hysteria as well, but I want to stay on the taxation issue because this is a bothersome issue for a lot of people out there. Somebody put a comment here in the chat that says, if you abolish the carbon tax, GST, and make 20% income tax across the board, you will win. I don't know that there's enough room in a federal budget to get rid of that much in the way of taxation. But I think what people are looking for, Max, is a meaningful reduction in their income taxes. Like I pay 53% on my income tax. Then I pay capital gains on money that I've invested in the market and I win. So when I win, after I've paid tax on income that I've been taxed on, then I have to pay more tax again on that income. And then when I go and take that money and I go buy things, I'm paying GST and fuel taxes and all kind of property tax. There's taxes on taxes on taxes. I think that one of the big issues that Canadians are not hearing any kind of a strong stance on is tax relief on their income. Does the PPC have a policy to reduce income taxes for Canadians?
We have a policy, yes, for the income tax. There's 5 tax brackets right now. Our goal is to reduce that in 3, to go down in 3 tax brackets. That will be more fair, but also we want to abolish the capital gain tax. No more capital gains tax. We will abolish that. For Polyev, his policy on that is to only, Trudeau did increase the capital gains tax. He will not increase it like Trudeau did, but a capital gains tax is against the creation of wealth in our country. So, but our position on tax want to lower taxes by 50 year. We need to be able to tackle the deficit, and we are, if you have the courage to cut, we will cut. We will be able to the capital gains tax, no more carbon tax, and also on the personal side, that will be a system. Instead of having 5 tax brackets, everybody will pay fewer taxes than they're paying right now with the 3 tax brackets.
There's common feedback that I get when I talk about the PPC, or if I mention Max Bernier. A lot of people say, well, you're going to split the vote. We don't want to split the vote. We have to make sure that, Pierre gets in. Splitting the vote's a bad idea. And I disagree with that, because I think that the Conservative Party will more than likely win the next election. But I believe that a voice needs to be placed in Parliament from a party like yours, Max, where you can push against many of their policies, because it's looking to me anyway. I mean, I've been in Canada for a long time now, since about 75 or 6. And the Conservatives today look more like liberal light. They look closer to socialists than they do conservatives. And I think a lot of the statements that they're making today, to win the next election, they're strong and they're trying to be balanced, but I don't think they're strong enough from the position of things like tax relief, being tough on immigration, refugees, climate alarmism. I want to get into all that a little bit, but what do you say to the people that say don't split the vote? Like, why give PPC votes?
I'm saying the same thing that you just said. Polyev will win the next election. If you look at the polls right now, is around 40%. To be able to have a majority here in Canada, you need to have about 30%. So if you look at the polls and people are not voting for Polyev, they're voting against Trudeau and the Liberals. So Polyev will win, and that there's no splitting the vote. So now these people can vote with their values, can vote with their conscience, can vote for what they believe and what they want. If you vote for what you want, you will have more chances to have what you want. So for us, knowing that fact that we will have a new government this year in 2025 after the next general election, people need the People's Party of Canada. We need their support, but they need our voice, because, like you just said, we are the only national political party that will speak about, climate change, immigration, and all these important issues, the woke ideology, all that. We have a very different platform than the Conservatives. So what we can do, if we become more influential, if we have more support from people who are so afraid to have Trudeau back, they just have to look at the reality. Trudeau and the Liberals won't be able to be back. And look at the history. You had that with Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin. Jean Chrétien, after 10 years in government, he was not popular. He resigned. They had Paul Martin for a couple of a year. And after that, Harper was able to win. In Canada, you have that, 9 years of Liberals, 9 years of Conservative. So Polyev will be the prime minister. Now we need to be there to keep him honest, to put him in the right direction, to be sure that, our ideas are outside the parliament. So that's a win-win. Polyev is out, and we will become more influential. Not Polyev, sorry, Trudeau.
Trudeau, yeah.
Trudeau will be out. Trudeau will be out, and we will be more influential.
Correct. Let's talk about immigration, refugees, and this sort of stuff. My family came to Canada from the United Kingdom in the 70s. They came through the proper channels. They needed to prove that they offered something to the country, that they were able to take care of themselves, that they were able to house themselves, that they were able to bring skills to the country and find work and contribute to the workforce. And I think a lot of that has changed since my parents came to Canada. I wasn't born here. I was born in England. So I've seen a lot of Canadians embrace, the notion of globalism, refugees, saving those that may be running from trouble. And I think that's created a lot of unnecessary problems in Canada. What is your party's stance? What is your stance on immigration and the refugee system that's working right now in Canada?
Yeah, on immigration, we want to have a moratorium on immigration. We had last year more than 1.2 million foreigners who came to our country, and we cannot afford that. It's very costly for us as Canadians. These people are living in hotels, downtown Montreal, downtown Niagara Falls. We are paying for that. There's no jobs for Canadians, so there's no jobs for these foreigners. And that's why, we have these country, and we are not able to build the number of houses we need. So we need to stop. It's a question of supply, demand. We need to stop the demand. That will help to solve the housing crisis. But also, we need to have more people because that will help, that will grow our economy. Yes, our economy is growing. You have more people. The economic pie is growing, but our piece of the pie is smaller. The GDP is growing, but the GDP per capita is going down. So our standard of living is going down. That's why we need to have that moratorium on immigration. We need to say no to mass immigration and yes to mass deportation, because we have illegals in our country. And for me, Richard, an illegal is a person who came here under, for example, a student permit. And after that, when that person has that diploma or their diploma, they don't want to leave the country. They must leave the country after that. They must go back to their country of origin. They don't have any paper after that. They don't have any permit. They're illegals. So we need to deport them if they don't want to go. Same thing for international foreign workers. If that person is temporary foreign workers, if that person is coming here, after their 6 months, they must go 5 million of illegals in our country. We don't know who they are. We don't know where they are. So we need to solve that with immigration. So that's our position on immigration. And on refugees, it's a fake refugees. Airport and Toronto Pearson Airport, they came here and they said, oh, I'm a refugee. We need to solve that. We need to have, yes, Canada is generous. We will be generous for the real refugees. But right now, that's strong for this country. But it's so sad that the Poilievre, the Trudeau, the NDP may say, oh, you're against immigrants. I'm not against. When a person will come here, like your parents, they will be able to have a job. They will be able to participate in our society. They will be able to speak English or French. That's not happening right now. When you come to Canada, you'll have more opportunities, and that's not the case. So just have that moratorium and for a couple of years, and after that, we'll go back to a real immigration policy.
Thank you. Another question I have for you is, we've seen a real degradation, a destruction of the family unit in Canada. The fabric of society is culture, is Canadians having children and families. I recognize that a lot of the immigration arguments that have been used over the years as well, we don't have a replacement rate, so we have to bring people in to help the country grow. And I think they've gone too far with that. I fully agree with what you're saying, but I think one of the problems that we're going to be left with is if you don't have Canadians having children, having families, then that's a problem. You don't have a replacement birth rate. It needs to be 2.1. I think in Canada right now it's something like 1.4, 1.6 or something like that. It's very, very low, and it's very low across all Western countries. I think that one of the problems that are facing Canadians today is that family law is incredibly hostile towards families. It's replaced men from the head of the household and put the government or the state in the head of the household. And family law is not encouraging families to stay together. It's not encouraging families to have a lot of children. It's in fact written in such a way that it discourages that. And in fact, in many cases, facilitates a lot of single parent households, more specifically single mother households. Is there anything in the PPC platform that is going to be tabled that is going to encourage the formation of family units, maybe a lower tax rate if you have so many children? Like I heard somewhere in Europe, I think it was Hungary, that they were offering income tax breaks if they had more than 3 or 4 children. Does the PPC have a platform or a plan or a strategy to fix that problem?
Yes, you're right by saying the birth rate in Canada and in Western countries is very low. And actually, the leftists and Polyev and all these people who are in favor of mass immigration, they're saying we need more people because our birth rate is very low. But that being said, these people who are coming to our country under the reunification of family and all these fake refugees are not younger than the population, maybe just a little bit. So that won't solve the problem. And what they're doing actually right now with immigration is, I call it like it is the replace the growth of our population. 98% of the growth of our population last year was coming from immigration. So yes, we're not making kids aging. It will be on a long term. We need to have a policy that will have an impact, not now, but it will have an impact in a couple of years. And the best way to do that is to have a pro-family policy. And what is a pro-family policy? First, in of family, your kid go to school in favor of family, and you just said like on or on ground and all we need to tackle that. People, Canadians must be able to have more money in their pocket, being able to buy a house. And so that's why you need to tackle the housing crisis, being able to be safe in their community. So if you do that all together, that may help. But, there's no magic policy to do that. And but for us, family values are important, and we'll do everything to try to be sure that Canadians will have more kids.
The the narrative around things like proxy wars, Ukraine, what's happening in the Middle East, the vast amount of money that's been sent over there. One of the things that's frustrated me incredibly is I have a possessions and acquisitions license, so I'm a licensed gun holder. And at the end of November, early December, the Trudeau government put another 300 plus non-restricted guns on a prohibited list under the guise of shipping them over to Zelensky and Ukraine, basically stealing my private property to give it to Zelensky. And I'm not really sure how you're going to wage war with 22s or 9mm, rifled long guns that are non-restricted. It seems absolutely absurd. But what is your position? What is the PPC's position on this agenda that Trudeau and even Polyev, seems to support, which is sending money and getting involved in proxy wars around the world when Canada has its own set of problems?
Polyev is supporting the war in Ukraine. He was very clear about that, and he was a little bit not happy with Trudeau. He said that Trudeau was not spending enough money and one was not giving enough money to Ukraine. You can see that he did a press conference on that, not once, but more than one, and asking Trudeau to be more generous. So our position is the opposite. We said in the beginning of that war, that is not our war. We must put our country first and Canada first. And this country is broken. We don't have any money. We have a huge deficit. We need to be able to bring back that money home and help our people first. So that's a Canada first policy. But for Polyev, a Canada first policy is to give more money to a corrupt democracy in Ukraine. So we must not participate in that. We must not give any money to Ukraine. We must not have any participation. Same thing in Middle East. I'm very pleased right now that there's a peace in Middle East. I hope it will be for a long time. That being said, now today, that's the inauguration of President Trump. And I believe that the war in Ukraine will end. That was an important part of his electoral campaign. He said that he was for peace and Putin was not his enemy. So same thing for us. Putin is not our enemy. Our big enemy is our own government. So that's why Ukraine and our position on foreign wars, we must not participate in that. And I must say that that's the history and the culture of our country. Look at what Jean Chrétien did with the war in Iraq. He decided not to participate in that. That was not in our own interest. And we were we as a country seen as a peace making and peacekeeping. So that must be our position. And so on the foreign interference, I'm not like Polyev and Trudeau. We want to promote peace and prosperity and in line with the culture and the history of our country.
Thank you. Climate hysteria. We hear a lot about global warming, rising sea levels, forest fires, all being part of a consequence of climate change, and we have to do something to fix that problem. Apparently we have the means to fix that problem. The thing that I find fascinating is that Canada as a country produces more will eat up more carbon dioxide than what it produces because of forests, land, and all the greenery that we have here. What is the PPC's position on taxation when it comes to carbon taxation, global alarmism, potentially locking people down, forcing people to eat bugs instead of buying beef anymore? There's a lot of these notions that have been spoken about, and I haven't heard much from the Pierre camp speaking out against stuff like that.
No, he's not, but we are against all that. We don't have any time to waste with that. Like I said, there's no climate emergency. And the good news today, President Trump just said that he will withdraw from the World Health Organization and there's no climate crisis. So the same, I said that, I don't know, 10 years ago. And, CO2 is not a pollutant. CO2 is a gas essential for life. So all these woke and leftist policies, we will withdraw from the Paris Accord. We will repeal these policies. And for the guns, like you just said, our position on guns is very clear. Everything that Trudeau did, we will undo all that. And we believe that it's your property. And I don't want the RCMP to change the category of guns, because there's something that is happening in the news. It must be the parliament. It must be under legislation. And so I will encourage everybody who is interested in our position on gun. You can read our platform on gun at peoplespartyofcanada.ca. It's a very detailed platforms. And what I can tell you, we know that the gun owner are not criminals, and we must go after real criminals and not gun owners.
Speaking of crime, because it's a real problem here. I mean, in the Toronto area, I hear anything from 56 to 70 something cars are stolen daily. People are having their homes broken into in the middle of the night. There was a case that we heard about recently where there was a father calling 911 and there was a gun held to his daughter's head and he was hung up on 3 times. Um, I'm interested in your position on castle law, something that exists in much of the United States, where you can defend your own property with a licensed firearm should somebody break into your house. Is that something that the PPC parties contemplate? Is that a platform that you're willing to stand on or interested in?
Yes, absolutely. Canadians must have the right to defend themselves and their property. Now it's not happening. If you do that, maybe you'll be the criminal. The RCMP can sue you for that. You can have to go in court. So we need to end that. The RCMP must focus on the real criminals, and you must have the right to defend yourself. And that's why we will change the criminal code to be sure that a person who will defend his home or property or life with a gun won't be the one that will be the criminal.
That's the first party leader I've heard speak out against that. So thank you. So acknowledging that crime is a problem in Canada and actually offering a potential solution to that problem, because
and Richard, also there's another solution to that. As you know, I was a conservative, and we voted tough laws against crime. We were tough on crime. So what we did, we passed legislation for minimum sentences for crimes that are crimes like murder or something like that, very odious crimes. And all that, when it came to the Supreme Court said, this is not constitutional. So our legislation was not able to be enforced. So what we must do the same thing, pass legislation that we did when I was a conservative, but use the non-understanding clause. When you use the non-understanding clause, the Supreme Court of Canada won't be able to say that your legislation is unconstitutional. So like that, your legislation will be enforced and will be able to have minimum sentences for some crimes in our country.
beautiful. I had a note here on decentralized federalism. What does that mean?
That means that your province will have more autonomy. Every province will have more autonomy. The federal government will be smaller. We won't interfere in provincial jurisdictions. We will, for example, the federal government has an infrastructure budget. We're spending billions of dollars in infrastructures. We won't do that, except if it's a transnational infrastructure. Yes, that is under the jurisdiction of the federal government. But for example, if you are in Quebec and you want to have, a road in Quebec City built, that must be by the taxpayers in Quebec. Why the taxpayers in BC will pay for a road in Quebec and vice versa. So that infrastructure funds was only there to buy votes. We will we will eliminate that. And so when I'm saying you that, we will have a very small government. For example, international aid, we will cut that, save $10 billion. We will be able to have a smaller government. So yeah, when I'm speaking about radical decentralization, I'm speaking about respecting our constitutions, not interfering in provincial jurisdictions. Like actually right now in healthcare, the federal government is giving about $52 billion for healthcare to provinces. I don't want to tax Canadians and after that transferring that money to provinces. Healthcare is a provincial jurisdictions and that must stay like that. So instead of that, we're going to give the GST to the provinces. That will become a provincial tax. And actually with the GST, the amount that the federal government is raising for that tax, it's about the same amount, $52 billion. So like that, provinces will be able to deal with healthcare. So radical decentralization, it's respecting the Constitution, and it is doing everything to go back to the core function of the federal government. Not, for example, daycare. Daycare must not be part. Dental care. Trudeau just put a dental care program. Poliev said that he's okay with that. And that must be under the jurisdictions of the provinces. It's not our responsibility. So the radical decentralization is to respect the constitution, and like that, your province will have more autonomy and you will have more freedom.
I want to talk to you about Canada's natural resources as well, because speaking to friends that have left Canada and gone to other parts of the world. So I had a conversation with a friend of mine that's been living in Dubai. They have a very, very low tax rate on personal income. It's practically nothing. On corporate income, it's very low. They have a great standard of living. It's very safe. You can take off your expensive watch, leave it on a coffee table, go to the bathroom. It's still there. It's very clean. They have regard for rule of law. They follow what seems to be common sense. But all they had to create this utopia, as some people call it, was oil. Canada has oil, natural gas, coal, forestry, lumber, fresh water, hydroelectricity, minerals. We have vast amounts of natural resources, and this country has been run by absolute morons for decades now. And we're not utilizing what Canada has because it's been shoved under the guise of, climate change, we have to protect the environment, blah, blah, blah. But I think that there's a responsible way which a country can extract its natural resources while preserving the beauty. What's the PPC's platform on natural resources and using the country's natural resources to improve the lives of Canadians and lower their tax rates?
Yeah, repeal all the legislation that the Trudeau government did pass, against the oil and gas industry. We want the private sector to be able to build pipelines that will go to the east and also to the west of our country to be able to export our natural gas and our oil and gas also, because now we have only one market, that's the US market. So we need to be able to diversify and try to find other markets like in Europe. Actually, if you remember, 4 years ago, the European Commission came here and they said, we want to have shale gas from you. And Trudeau was not able to answer that request because we don't have any pipelines. And actually, we have in our own province, in Quebec right now, in my province, a moratorium on the exploitation of shale gas. So what we must do also is to change the equalization formula to be less generous, because right now in Quebec, there's no incentive for the provincial government to develop their natural resources. Same thing with New Brunswick, because they receive a lot of money from equalization. And if they're doing that, their equalization payment will go down. So we need to send the right incentive to provinces to develop their own natural resources. And the way to do that is to give less equalization money, and we can do that. Being less generous will be fair for everybody, and that will be a great incentive for them to develop their natural resources. And the federal government must be there also to be sure that Trudeau passed legislation on the environment, to have before a project would be approved, they will have to pass different steps with the federal government about the environment and the equity and all these nonsense woke policies. Will abolish that. If you have a project, and that will impact the environment, your province can do the investigation, but the federal government must not add to that, and that's happening right now. So free the economy, no more crazy legislation on the environment, being sure that provinces will be able to develop their own natural resources by being less generous in the equalization payment, and that would be fair for Western Canada. So yeah, if you put all these policies together, Canada will be a place where you will be welcome to invest and exploit natural resources here in our country.
Donald Trump has just become the president of the United States today. What's your take on President Trump?
Yeah, it's a good news. It's the beginning of a revolution, a peaceful revolution, not only in the US, but in every Western country. Like here in Canada, we are the PPC. If you look at the challenges that Western countries have, it's about immigration. They need to control. We need to control our border. We need to control our immigration. That's happened. The discussion is happening here in Canada with us. That discussion is happening in Europe and in France, in Germany. So the election of Trump is the first step toward a big revolution in Western countries. And for us here in Canada, maybe, the establishment politicians are looking at Trump and they say, oh, he will impose 25% tariffs. That will be bad for the economy. Actually, today, Trump didn't speak about that. If we want him to not impose this tariff on us and our economy, we just have to do what he wants us to do, secure our borders, deport our illegals, reinvesting in our defense. If you do these three things, you won't have any tariff, but they're not ready. These establishment politicians, they're not ready. So for me, the election of Trump is a good news. And I must admit, if Trump is able to do only 25% of what he said during his electoral campaign, that would be a big success. So yeah, change are happening in the US. And here we have an opportunity in 2025 to bring these changes by pushing these establishment politicians. And I hope that Richard, your viewer, will support the PPC. And if they want to know more, they can always go. We have an electoral platform, like and I will encourage people to go also on the website of the Conservative Party of Canada and try to find Pierre Poilievre's electoral platform. You won't find that because Poilievre is a follower, he is not a leader, he is following the public opinion, he is not leading the public opinion. For me, Canadians have been manipulated by the mainstream media and the leftists, so that's why we have this platform and we believe that we have the best vision for this country.
What do you think of the idea that Donald Trump was tossing around about Canada becoming the 51st state of the United States and having a Canadian governor report to President Trump?
That was a joke. That was, a good joke in the beginning. But, I'm not afraid of that. My main message for Trump about that is simple. In Canada, we are 40 million people, just like California. And I will say to Mr. Trump, President Trump, they did a poll in Canada just before your presidential election, and 62% of Canadians were saying that they would have voted for Harris and the Democrats. So I don't believe that President Trump wants to have another big California that will vote Democrat. That will change the electoral tissue of the U.S. forever. So that was a joke. That won't happen. And I must say, like President Trump is doing well by putting U.S. first, working for Americans, making America great again. But here in Canada, my job is to do the same, putting Canada first, Canadian first, our country first, and working to be sure to have a prosperous country, a secure country. And I agree with Trump about the problems that we are having with open mass immigration and open borders. So that 51st state won't happen. And it's not in the advantage of President Trump as a Republican, like I just said.
The notion of wokeness, gender ideology, 57 genders, rainbows everywhere, leftism, you've kind of touched on it as we've been speaking for the last 44 minutes. What is your party's position on that? It sounds like it's pretty clear, if I'm being honest, but what's your party's position on reversing a lot of that nonsense? Like, how would you do that?
We will do the same thing that President Trump is doing right now. Actually, in his inaugurational speech, he said that there's only two sexes. I said that 4 years ago, and Poliev was not able to speak about that, afraid of the trans lobby. There's only two sexes. A man must not be able, a biological man must not be able to be in jail for women. A young boy, biological young boy must not play sport with biological girls. So we must end all that. And I'm very pleased that President Trump is doing that, because right now, in the mainstream media, as you may know, Richard, they don't want to speak about us, the People's Party. They don't want to speak about our platform, because they know that we will grow faster because we are speaking about real common sense. So now with Trump, the Canadian media will have to tell us what Trump is doing and speak about the end of the wokeism in the US and all these gender ideology. So more people will be aware of that, and more, and actually we are the only party who raised that when it was not popular. And I'm very pleased with that. And here in our platform in Canada, it's part of our platform. We'll do the same. Bring back the real common sense here in Canada.
So here's some common sense questions. So would you take tampons out of men's bathrooms in federal buildings?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Would you only raise the Canadian flag on Parliament buildings and not put up any other flag?
Yes, no, the flag that is with a lot of colors, we won't promote that. There's only one Canadian flag.
Should two gay men be allowed to adopt a baby boy?
If they're 18 and more, I don't want the government to be in the bad bedroom of people. If you're a gay and you want to do what you want, I won't interfere there. I won't interfere there. I won't promote that, but I won't interfere.
Okay, so that's a libertarian, position. I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Let's see. What else do we have here? Because I know you've got to go in a few minutes. Is there anything that we need to touch on that you haven't had an opportunity to talk about yet that you want to take some time?
Well, yeah, I just want people to know, Richard, that we had the bad news last week. We, as the leader of the People's Party, I was supposed to participate in the debates commission, the debate leaders, but the leaders debate commission said last week they changed their regulation again. They told me in 2021 that you need to have 4% at the previous election to be able to participate in the national debates. We had 5%, as you know. So I was supposed to participate in the debate at this election in 2025, but they changed the rules. That's not the criteria, and they put other criteria that will be very difficult for us to achieve. So they don't want us. And that's an insult to the 840 people who voted for the PPC. These people need a voice during this debate. And like the discussion that we had today, all our policies are very different than these establishment political parties. So that won't be a real debate without us. And what I'm asking people, you can go on our website, peoplespartyofcanada.ca. You can sign a petition over there. We will send that petitions to the Leaders Debate Commission to try to force them to have us in the debate, because, it's we believe in freedom of speech. We believe in democracy in this country, and it is undemocratic what they did. And actually, it's a little bit sad for the democracy when they decided that. But we will fight, and we need people to help us. So if they want to send an email, they can go on our website, and we have all the details.
I hope that one of the things that people with a platform entertain, so guys like me, they'll invite you on to have a conversation on a podcast format. I also hope that your team has thought about reaching out to influential Canadians and trying to get on their podcasts. For example, I'm sure you saw the interview with Pierre Poilievre with Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Has an invite been extended to you? Has your team reached out to him to see if you can get on his platform to have a conversation about your topics?
Yeah. Yes and no. So no, we didn't reach to him to have an invitation. But yes, I was with him in 2021 before the election, and my goal is to do that couple of weeks before the election. My goal is to be able to be with him again, like I did before the last election. So we will ask him when the time will come. I hope he will accept. I hope I'll be able to participate again with him and having a real discussion on policies, because I did watch the interview that Poliev did. He was good. He was a good communicator, but there's no policy. He was speaking like he did usually with empty slogan. So that's why I wanted, and I want to debate with him in the leaders debate. And I want to be able to speak about our platform also with Jordan Peterson and other influencer. But if my message today, if you're a YouTuber or an influencer, or you have you have a podcast, don't forget, you can go on my website, write to us. And my goal, yes, is to be more present, not only in person by traveling across the country, but also on social media. So write to us at info@peoplespartyofcanada.ca, and that will be my pleasure to be with you. A big one or a small one, for me, it's important. I want our ideas to be out there, and a good way to do that is to participate on social media, like I'm doing with you today, Richard.
Yeah, and I guess the final word for me as we sort of wrap up is I don't buy the whole "don't split the vote" notion. It seems pretty clear that the Conservatives are going to win the next election. I think that if you cast a vote for the People's Party, you at least present an opportunity for them to capture one seat in Parliament, and whether it's 1, 2, 5, but some sort of a presence where they can push back on anything that might lean too far left from the Conservatives. And I don't think that you're going to get that from the Conservatives. You certainly won't get it from the Liberals. You won't get it from Jagmeet Singh Party. You won't get it from anybody on that side of the cap. I think there has to be more balance in Parliament and in Canadian politics. Max, I wish you the best in the upcoming election. I truly hope that your party captures at least a few seats so that you do have a voice. So don't think for a second that you should reserve your vote for a party that's not PPC, because it's not going to have an impact. If you keep voting that way, you're never going to have an impact. And if you truly believe in a lot of the things that Max Bernier has spoken about today and the platform that the PPC stands on, I believe that you have to cast the vote in that direction, in the expectation that they capture some presence in Parliament. Because if you want him or the next party leader to have a place on the debate panel, they have to have a presence. They have to have a known entity. And I think that, for guys like you today, Max, I would have my team be reaching out to Joe Rogan, Patrick Bet-David, anybody with a platform that Canadians watch, even if it's in the United States, and have a conversation with them and speak your truth, man, because it needs to be heard. If we're going to have any kind of real change, we have to lean in that direction very, very strongly. So thank you for joining me today, Max.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for giving me that opportunity. And yes, we will try to be on different podcasts. That's my goal. Actually, I'm looking at what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. did in the US during his campaign when he was independent. He was canceled like me by the mainstream media, but he was able to grow his support by being present on different podcasts and social media. So that's part of what I'm doing and we will continue to do. But thank you again for giving me that opportunity, and let's stay in touch. If you need something, just be in touch with the team, the PPC team.